Well, good morning, Southern Oregon, and welcome back to the Real Estate Show. I'm Alice Lema. I'm a broker here in beautiful Southern Oregon with John L. Scott Real Estate. And we're talking here to you from the early part of February, and it's a little bit of everything. We've got scraping ice in the morning to turning on the AC in the afternoon. And that combination just reminds me a little of our housing market this week because we had a little bit of everything. So we are still, in transition. We're trying to stabilize. We do have more properties coming on the market now. Thank goodness. Thank you, sellers. Thank you. And we still have a backlog of buyers. So we still have that combination of things, which is very much like our weather. But what that tells us is that we are still trying to stabilize. What's throwing cold water on the whole show is, right, the interest rates. So even though the upticks are small, it is starting to affect our buyers, and our buyers need to stay in close contact with their lenders, get their pre-approvals updated frequently, and also ask how that affects their closing costs. Additionally, please, sellers, you need to ask the same question of the buyers. You're receiving offers, hopefully you're getting offers, and you want to make sure that those buyers were recently updated with their lenders, because you know what? Not all buyers stay on top of that stuff like they should. So ask those questions. If you're a seller getting offers, double check, because you don't want any surprises, after you open escrow. So speaking of surprises, what about the supply chain and material costs that we're all experiencing? For those of us that are doing rehab, new construction, that sort of thing, we've got Brad Bennington today interviewing. He's the executive officer of the Builders Association here in Southern Oregon, and he's coming along with Giles, a Mutual Omaha Mortgage. And we're going to talk about what it's like to try to build something, what it's like to get money to build something, to do a mortgage. How do you do a loan lock for 6 months if your house hasn't even started yet? What if you have a house to sell? And then we're going to talk about the effect this is having on our builders and our contractors, because you know what? They're a part of our community. They're not actually out to gouge us. They're just having trouble absorbing the shocking inflation, the material shortage. And you can get materials. They're 2, 3, 4 times more expensive than they were. But Brad Bennington has a lot of hopeful advice and good tips if you want to do new construction. So please stay tuned for that. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. We're brought to you by John L. Scott, Medford, Ashland, Giles, Mutual Omaha Mortgage, and the Rogue Valley Association Realtors. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Real Estate Show. I'm Alice Lema, broker John L. Scott, and today we have one of our favorite 2 guests. We have Giles, Mutual Omaha Mortgage, and Brad Bennington, the executive officer of the Builders Association, Southern Oregon. Welcome, guys.
Hey, good morning.
Thanks. Happy weekend.
Happy weekend. So let's just jump in, because the complaints that I'm hearing from people about construction in general is it's hard to find anything. It's hard to find new construction. And when you do find it, we have builders having to change the prices kind of in the middle. So it's really getting to be a problem. Can you weigh in on that, Brad?
So Alice, yeah, that's an interesting comment that you just made. I'm sure Guy has got some interesting perspective on that as well. But Alice, the bottom line is we don't. When I say we, I'm talking about the construction industry in general. Just across the whole country. In general, our industry does not have enough of anything to meet the needs of our community. So, in all 50 states, we have skilled labor shortages, we have contractor shortages, and we have product interruptions because of the way the government handled the COVID situation. There were, whole manufacturing segments that shut down their factories because Congress wouldn't give them any liability protection for lawsuits in other words, if one worker became COVID positive and went to work, then theoretically every other employee in that plant could be exposed,
Right.
and there was no liability protection from Congress. So all they could do was literally shut whole factories down. And then we saw the unemployment numbers spike, and then what we saw is we saw all of those supply lines dwindle and eventually stop. As we got further through this thing, about a year down the road, the factories, started manufacturing again, but there's a big backlog. So what that means is we have whole gigantic product line areas that are just the shelves are empty. We're having problems getting all kinds of things that used to be really easy to get a hold of: roofing, drywall, believe it or not, the products that we make concrete out of, cement. Because all these industries just literally shut down to protect themselves until all of this got somewhat sorted out. And as encouraging as all of that sounds, it's even worse here in Southern Oregon. Why? Because on September 8, 2020, we lost 3,600 housing units in less than 20 hours.
Yeah.
So here in Southern Oregon, we have an especially poignant situation that you might say. We can talk about more about the nuts and bolts later if you want to, but that's sort of the 30,000 foot view is when it comes to our industry, Alice and Guy, there isn't enough of anything to meet the needs that our community would like to meet with the resources that we have available right now.
Yeah, and don't you think that that's also exasperated by our land planning policies? We just seem to have a shortage of not only materials and labor, but buildable land.
We do. You and Guy, because you're well-informed people, you know that Oregon is the most land use restricted state in the United States. It's actually harder to build here than it is Hawaii, believe it or not.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and it takes a typical development arc for a developer is about 3 years from the time the developer buys the property until he can actually create a sellable product. If everything goes well, is about 3 years. So just imagine a business where you have to put all your money on the table, and borrow all your money, put it on the table, and let it sit there for 3 years while you buy all of these reports and permits and all of these other regulatory oversight items that you need to do. Then 3 years later, you're actually able to build a product that you hope you can sell for a profit to the public to begin recovering your investment. How does that sound for a business model?
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So Guy, what kind of information do you have to give your clients, your buyers, when they come to you and say, we'd like to try to get a mortgage for new construction? Like, how do you prepare them?
Well, mainly I just kind of prepare them for, well, when I'm qualifying them, I'll buffer, put a little padding in the rate on our end. That's really what it's all about, because the rest of it, once these guys are in contract, they're really not going to, these builders aren't changing stream right in the middle of the contract. So we have most of the variables right there. We can figure up the millage rate, basically what the taxes will be on a house. But that's the one thing we don't know is the rates. So I'll usually put in, a quarter to 3/8 and make sure that they can still qualify on that. And then, once we're in contract, just at this point, kind of get them locked in as early as possible, even if we're doing, some extended locks. I don't like to go 6 months out on a lock, because whether or not a company says it, they end up putting a bigger buffer in there just to kind of cover themselves in case, the rates go up between then and the time that it closes. So there's always a cost to that. You can basically close for, 30 to 60 days free. But when you start getting into the long ones, you're kind of hedging a little bit about where that might be at the end. So really, we're just trying to make sure that, again, there's enough of room in there in case rates go up a little bit. And we also, right now I'm encouraging people to get in and get their contract signed, because I can't tell you how many times I've heard right in the middle, hey, you know what, if you have anybody else, we're going to raise our stuff up because of cost of materials. And it's sad, but it's just one of those moving targets right now. So we just do the best we can, and thankfully we haven't really had any fallout in a few years over.
Well, it's interesting you should bring that up, Guy, because I wrote a offer a new construction just 24 hours ago. And while we were in negotiations, the builder raised the prices of the subdivision.
Yeah, and I can't imagine any builder would want to do something like that. Unfortunately, it's just the nature of the environment that we're in right now. I deal with things like this daily. On Wednesday of this week, we had payroll, the ADP payroll numbers come out, and we're expecting $200,000 or 200,000 new jobs, and it was minus 700,000. I mean, could you imagine walking into the lumber store, going down to buy the materials, and all of a sudden they said, we don't have it, but we know somebody that does if you want to pay double for it. And that poor contractor's, kind of stuck there with a bill now and a contract written. So it's weird times right now.
Yeah, and then the interest rate, because the new construction, unless the house is finished, it can take, like I'm closing on another one in a week, and it took the full 6 months because they bought it basically with just the foundation. So here we are 6 months later, and their interest rate changed a lot. How often is that happening, Guy?
Well, I mean, it's definitely happened over the last, since about, I don't know, I guess it started in December and then really accelerated through January. We're probably up a good, 0.3% to rate in the last 30, 40 days.
Wow.
And I haven't tracked it exactly, but again, I've already kind of talked to people about that, and I kind of my forecast, which I'll probably be dead wrong, is I think they raise a little bit more and then they kind of calm down towards the end of the year is what I really believe is going to happen. I think we have a Fed now that's in a really tough position. He came out talking about a lot of rate increases over this year, and then to have these ADP numbers come out this week like they did, I don't know how you really backpedal from that. I think he lost some credibility saying that it was the strongest labor market that he's ever seen. I don't envy him or think he has an easy position. They're walking a really fine line, but hopefully we can, come up with a little bit of fiscal responsibility moving forward and maybe kind of settle down the big swings in this stuff.
So Brad, that poses an interesting question. What are you hearing from your builders about the cost, the sudden spikes, and also the interest rate changes?
Yeah, Alice, good question. Well, keep in mind that this manifestation has been occurring in our industry pretty much ever since our governor made her first declaration back in March 8, 2020. This is not new. This turbulence that Guy is talking about is real, and it's been happening. And really, the only thing that's different is how bad is it right now? We actually Congressman Walden and Congressman Bentz actually did a lot of work getting us some help on price stabilization. But let me just give you one quick example, Alice. Believe it or not, even though we live in the softwood capital of the Northwest, one of the most robust timber areas on the entire planet, all of our OSB board, which is a product that is very commonly used in construction, comes down from Canada. So does anybody know what's going on in Canada right now? And I'll give you a hint. It has something to do with wheels that turn around and things that carry lots of weight. Okay, I'll tell you. The problem is we're in a situation where nearly all of our OSB board, it gets trucked down from Canada, and aside from the production side, now we can't get trucks underneath it to get it down here. So we literally have a gigantic problem right here and right now as we're having this conversation, getting enough of this product for our builders to use in construction. I know it sounds crazy, but that's where we're at. And one thing I want to mention, since Guy kind of brought it up, and you mentioned a contract that had to be modified. We're actually encouraging anyone that's involved in an ongoing construction negotiate with your contractor for what we call an escalation clause. And here's why. You might think that it's a good idea, or you might think it's in your benefit. If the contractor's prices go up, you say, well, you know what, you just eat it, you're on contract. It's not my problem. If you have a situation where your contractor's costs go up beyond what his company is able to tolerate, that contractor may have to file bankruptcy. And if that contractor does have to file bankruptcy on your project, let me tell you, you have a problem the likes of which you do not want to have. It could literally because of all the lien holders and everything that are involved. We're strongly recommending to all of our builders and any of your listeners that want to engage a contract with a reputable builder, and make sure you get a reputable one. You just have to agree. You have to sit down across the coffee table from each other and agree. These are the most turbulent times that we have ever experienced in our industry, and this is a team situation. And you have to come up with a way that is acceptable to both sides. That if these costs go up, and it's not anyone's fault that they go up, but if these costs go up, you have to decide how you are going to equitably address that in the contract, so that it doesn't have really bad unintended consequences.
Well, and you might as well deal with the reality as a team. I really like that advice. We're talking to Brad Bennington, the Executive Officer of Builders Association here in Southern Oregon, and Guy Giles of Mutual of Omaha Mortgage. We're talking about construction, labor, we're talking about materials, what to do if you're trying to get a house done, and why you should not wait if you have your eye on some new construction. From our sponsors, John L. Scott, Ashland, Medford, also Guy Giles, Mutual Omaha Mortgage, and the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors. We'll be right back. Well, here we are again, folks, back at the Real Estate Show. We're talking to Brad Bennington, the Executive Officer, Builders Association of Southern Oregon. Lots
Howdy.
of interesting tips and updates going on with the supply chain and building. And then Guy Giles, Mutual Omaha Mortgage, weighing in on what it's like to try to do new construction or get mortgages in general. So Guy, one of the things we wanted to loop back with you was the timelines for new construction can be kind of lengthy. Just like to kind of hear what you have to discuss with your buyers when they're thinking of getting a mortgage for something that can be more than 60 days long.
Well, you just it's kind of funny because there's actually the stuff we kind of mentioned earlier as far as just buffering their rate a little bit in case it goes up, and hopefully at some point we'll be surprising them with, hey, the rate actually dropped between now and that point. But we're looking at longer locks in certain situations. They can tend to get a little bit costly, so we kind of watch out for that. But I think there's some other moving parts that are difficult when it comes to that, because you're trying to logistically sell your house also. A lot of the builders want you to have your house listed before they'll accept the contract on this build.
Oh, so that's a good point.
Yeah, what are you going to do at that point? If your mom or dad doesn't live in town, and especially if you're 85 years old, then the odds go down that happens. So you have to just just figure out where you're going to be, and then hope that the market is right at that point to be able to sell your house. Because right now it's really easy to get out of the house. Rent backs, we're allowed to do it, per the guidelines, where you have 60 days to occupy a house. So if you buy it January 1st, you have 60 days after that to get in there. So, if we're talking 6 to 8 months on a build, and that's provided that they can get the materials that they want. I do take issue with one thing that Brad said when he said that it's nobody's fault. It's somebody's fault, just not those two people sitting at the table, in my opinion. And I'll kind of leave that to your own imagination. But on our end, again, it's just about getting them in the best position, and kind of not really hope for the best, but just look at all the different contingencies that could happen and address them up front.
So don't I remember that, Guy, you have some kind of a bridging lending device product to help people when they need more than 60 days?
Yeah, there is kind of a cross collateralization loan in a lot of my in a lot of my instances, it doesn't really apply because my people are moving here from out of state a lot of
Oh,
times.
gotcha.
There's title issues when you try to do the cross collateralization. There's a couple of other programs out there that they're calling same as cash, but when you really dive deep into them, I haven't found one to be real viable. Probably the best bet is to sell your house and get into it's just kind of tough. Again, it's all we can really do is just try to time things the best that we can.
Yeah, it's hard to have, because we don't have temporary housing anymore like we used to. The rental market has its own problems.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's some of the things that I'm hearing as far as rents go, it's pretty sad. I really wish that the governor and some people, I don't mean to keep picking on them, but I don't know if they actually ever get out in the streets and see that there are a lot of, this doesn't hurt the really rich people. This hurts just the average guy or gal that's trying to buy their first house or trying to rent a place for that matter. Everything it seems like they're doing is just counterproductive for affordable housing. And I don't know how they spend that at voting time and keep getting elected. But unfortunately, I sit across the desk from these people all the time. But then again, there's a lot of happy endings too in my job, so I'm not going to stay focused on any negative.
Yeah, but that brings up a good point, Brad. When we're talking about the effects of the legislation, and you mentioned that there were things put in motion just a couple of years ago. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that and then kind of fast forward us to where we're at now? And what do you hear from your builders about having the consequences of that?
Yeah. So Alice, as you know, the Builders Association is not a political organization. We do not engage in political activity, but we work on policy because policy affects our communities. At the end of the day, what are we all trying to do? We're all trying to serve the need of our community for the housing that we need, right? So when people come to you, what are they looking for? They're looking for the most important place anyone can have, which is their home, where they're going to live, where they're going to raise their family. And the cost of that home really affects their quality of life. Whatever that house payment is to secure that home for their family, that's consuming a certain amount of money that they can't use for other things. So it's very important that for our industry that we work on policy. And Alice, to answer your question, one of the things that really affects our industry, we're a highly regulated industry. The cost of regulatory impact last year in Southern Oregon was about 40%. So if you look at a $400,000 home, $160,000 of that $400,000 home are simply compliance with regulatory impacts, right?
What? Can
That's
you
not,
say that again? Those are
yeah,
huge numbers. Can you say
it
that
is.
again?
It is. Yeah. 40% of the cost of a new home last year was regulatory impact. Now, a lot of that is in the ground. And I'm not going to get out into the weeds, but we have a highly regulated industry. We have the hardest state in the union to build in because of land use regulation. And that's just a fact. That $400,000 home includes $160,000 of regulatory impact. That was
Wow.
last year. Last year was the long session in our Oregon legislature, and that legislative session, because of the actions of some people I'm not going to name here, added another $20,000 to $50,000 to the cost of every new home built in Oregon.
Oh, no.
The short session is in session right now, and there's legislation that some of these people are considering, whose names I won't mention, that could easily add another $30,000 to $40,000 to the cost of a new home on top of that. And that's outside of inflation and outside of product availability. These are just regulatory impacts that are being legislatively mandated. And again, as contractors and builders, we have to comply with the law. We don't get to pick and choose. They tell us what we have to do, what we can't do, and so on and so forth. We have no choice but to comply with it. So what does that mean to your listeners? Well, what it means to your listeners is that if they are considering either getting into a home, buying a new home, building a new home, we understand that it probably looks turbulent because it is. It's a turbulent market out there. But if they work with professionals like you, all I can tell you is everything that I'm looking at is no matter what that price is today or whatever that price was in 2021, it's going to be higher in 2022. It's going to be higher in 2023, 24, 25. And we're not going to talk about inflation numbers here because I don't claim to be an economist. But all three of us that are on this program right now, we know one thing. We're all old enough to remember what happened during the Jimmy Carter years and
Yeah.
what happened afterwards.
Yeah.
So if your listeners have an inclination, if they're inclining toward buying a home or building a home, as turbulent as it might be, sit down, do the math, make sure that you can afford what you intend to do. But whatever you want to do, it's just going to be more expensive next year and the year after than it is right now.
Wow. So are there any more details about exactly what is more expensive now because of the legislation? Anything specific, or are we just getting these raw numbers from the last legislation?
Actually, I have. I'm not gonna go over it here because it would bore you all terribly. I actually
Okay.
I've got our scorecard from the last legislative session. It runs 32 pages. It's actually,
Oh,
yeah, we started the last legislative session with 4,000 bills in the gun, and I think by the time we got it down to maybe 400 or 500. But it's, again, this is the kind of thing where you can really lose people in the weeds. But just suffice to say, this is, let me just give you one example. One of the bills that was signed into law by the governor was her energy bill, and part of that energy bill said this: in the state of Oregon, vendors may only sell appliances that are of a certain level of efficiency, and it's very, very, very high. So what that means is let's just say, pick a product line, Westinghouse or Bosch or LG or whatever it might be. They have their entire product line, but in the state of Oregon now, they can only sell their very upper crust line. That's it. That's all you can
oh,
sell. And the governor signed that into law in the last legislative session. So what that's going to mean is you go into the appliance store, and where let's say you might have had 20 refrigerators to choose from, or 20 dishwashers to choose from, or 20 ranges to choose from. Now you're going to have 3, and they're all going to be very, very expensive.
well, that would explain a lot. We all were kind of wondering, the prices of even a medium range refrigerator went from, 12 or 1,500 to over $3,000.
Yeah. Well, again, part of that is product availability, and what the governor did is really, the impact of that is really coming in 2022 and after. But again, if you're interested, I'd be happy to go over you and Guy what happened. And again, in our short session, we have other bills. The impact of legislation, the impact of regulatory oversight in our industry is growing 5 to 6 times faster than the consumer price index. That's how bad it is.
Wow. And our consumer price index is pretty high.
It is, isn't it?
Wow. Wow. So, and this all translates, like you said, Brad, it affects the person in the store who's trying to get a washer because theirs just blew up. And I didn't realize that all these new regulatory demands were just placed on regular appliances.
Yeah.
And then to loop that back to the contractor and how that house building industry is suffering. What are the individual contractors having to do to make it through this time and still make a living to feed their families and provide a basic necessity like housing?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, Alice, is that our contractors are just like any other small business person here in Southern Oregon. They're just out there in the marketplace complying with all the laws that apply to our industry and try to make payroll and whatnot. But the turbulence is severe. And here's something that I'm going to say that we know is true is, some people are going to look at our industry and say, "Oh, we see prices going up. We know those contractors. They're just gouging us. They're gouging us."
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
Let me tell you that it is the exact opposite, and I'll tell you what I mean. Our contractors, because of the commercial activity tax, and you know what that is, because of all these regulatory oversights that have been imposed upon them. Even though our contractors are having to charge more for their services, they're actually making less. Their margins have actually gone down. And the other thing is that we know historically contractors are 4 times more likely to fail financially from trying to manage too much work than if they have the right amount or not enough work.
Oh,
So
gosh.
so we already have a critical shortage of contractors. We only have 25% of the residential contractors today that we had about 13 years ago.
Wow, we're
25%.
going to hold that thought right there. Brad Bennington, Executive
Okay.
Officer, Building Association of Southern Oregon. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back to the Real Estate Show, folks. Alice Lema here, broker John L. Scott, interviewing Brad Bennington, the Executive Officer of the Builders Association, Southern Oregon. Guy Giles had to jump off, a bad connection. Before we went to the break, Brad, we were talking about some of the impact on the contractors, the builders themselves, because basically they're small business people.
Right, yeah. The majority of the contractors here in the Rogue Valley are small businesses. These companies have, most of the time they've got less than 5 employees, so they're really just small businesses. A lot of times they're families. And the reality is the contractors that we have typically are very good at what they do. They're good tradesmen. They're good roofers. They're good concrete finishers. They're good drywall hangers. They're good landscapers and so on. But if you can imagine trying to drink out of a fire hose, that's what these contractors are faced with, trying to comply with all the regulatory oversight that's imposed upon them. I'm telling you, the paperwork that our builders have to do in this industry, unless someone has been through it, you wouldn't believe it. The building code, the planning code, all of the various requirements that we have to comply with would make a Philadelphia lawyer dizzy. And these guys and these companies, they have to do all their work during the daytime and then go home and do all their paperwork at night, probably like you hardworking realtors do. And in the meantime, the service that they are providing, you could argue, is probably one of the most critical services that there is to any community, which is what? Building homes for people to live in. Is there anything more important than for people to have a home to live in? And our people are the ones that do it. That's what we do all day, every day, is build homes for people.
Yeah, it is super critical, and especially in Southern Oregon, because we've had a shortage for a while, and then we had the fires, as you were mentioning earlier. And having a reputable builder is just so important, and we really need to kind of help our small businesses make it through these times.
Right, that's right. And again, it's always good to remember 3 things when you go to get a contractor. Number 1, make sure he's a licensed contractor in the state of Oregon. That's really important. The second thing, make sure you get 3 references of people that he's worked for that are projects similar to what you want to do. And the third thing is do not begin work or transmit any money until you have a clear, understandable, and enforceable contract. Those three things are very important, Alice.
Yes, they really are, because that's how you end up with the project not getting done the way you wanted it. And the builders want the clients to be happy. They don't want anybody upset, but that's clarity in writing, you can't beat that, right?
That's right. But the good news is we've got a lot of good contractors in our area, Alice. But the problem is that they are all stretched thin because they cannot. We just literally, we don't have the material. We don't have the even the equipment, the machinery, all the products that we need. We're shorthanded all the way around. So they're doing the best that they can, kind of making bricks without a straw. Here at the Builders Association of Southern Oregon, what we do is we work on education, advocacy, and policy support for the building industry. Why? So that our builders can create products for our community that are safe, sustainable, and affordable. That's what we work on. So for your listeners, that's important for them to know is they need to know that we are their advocate when it comes to these regulatory issues with our legislators and so on. We're the ones reminding them that every one of these good ideas that they can come up with has to be paid for by your listeners. And please make sure that it's really necessary before you do it.
Yeah, that's very, very good advice. And then the Builders Association is also a resource. You are there to help as you said, educate and advocate. So it's definitely a great resource that we have in our valley.
It is. Well, we're fortunate. We have a very, down here in Southern Oregon, things are so much better than other parts of the state. We have, we definitely have our challenges down here because of all the housing that we lost that we're trying to rebuild. But we have, our building officials here I would say, are as good as anywhere in the state. Our legislators here are mostly very concerned about serving our citizens. Our governments here, our county government here, I think is very good. Our city governments, for the most part, are very interested in helping us serve the community. But you just can't get away from the fact that we have an acute shortage of housing that we're not going to fix anytime soon, Alice.
Yeah, yeah.
We just don't have the resources to build all the housing that our community needs right now. But we are working very, very hard to do the best that we can.
So how is it going with the rebuilding in the fire area? How is the new construction down there?
Right. So in Phoenix, things are going, I would say, pretty well. Perhaps in Talent, there might be some, I don't know a polite way to say it, so I'm not going to talk about it. So the rebuild is going, in Phoenix is going very well. In Talent, there's some difficulties there. But the bottom line is our builders are doing everything that they can to help the people. And for people that are interested in, again, Alice, your listeners and people that you work with, the thing that's important is costs are going up. Things are just going to get more expensive. Interest rates are going to go up. So if they're interested in housing, if you can qualify, I would never suggest anyone do something that you can't afford. But if you need a home, and if you are working with a real estate professional like you or a finance professional like Guy, and you qualify for a home, please consider the fact that the money rate right now is probably as low as it's going to be for a long time, and that costs going into the future are only going to go up. So as inconvenient as it might be, this might be the time for some of your listeners to think about buying a home.
I totally agree. Even though we've had a nudge up on some of those interest rates, it's still to me like free money. And you and I remember back, you mentioned during the 80s, 70s, 80s, when we had our last hyperinflation, and kind of what the outcome of that was, people were having to pay 11 to 16% interest rate back then. We're not thinking that's going to happen now, but 3%, 4%, 5%, that used to be considered free money.
Oh yeah. Well, in 1980, the state of Oregon had to repeal its usury laws because the banks were charging more than the loan sharks used to.
Oh my gosh, I did not know that. That's crazy. How funny.
Yeah. Those are interesting times. I wish I didn't remember them as well as I do.
So we only have a minute left, but there was one quick question I wanted to circle back on. You mentioned a commercial activity tax. What is that?
Yeah, the commercial activity tax, they called it the School Funding Act, I think, and it was essentially a sales tax is what it is. You can Google that. There were certain legislators that thought it was a great idea, and other legislators that were in the minority that said this is not a good time, because this tax hit us right in the middle of the COVID thing, right? So businesses were already up against the ropes when this commercial activity tax was levied, and it's a big tax. So because I don't pretend to be a tax expert, I'm not going to talk about it. I'll just leave that to you and your listeners to look it up. But the commercial activity tax was just one of many legislative actions that were taken that raised the overhead of people in our industry. And every time you raise our overhead, that overhead has to be recaptured somewhere. And of course, it's always the consumer that winds up paying for all these great legislative ideas.
Yep. Well, Brad Bennington, we so appreciate you being on the show. Executive Officer, Builders Association of Southern Oregon. Let's have you back again soon. Thank you so much. And
thank you, Alice.
Southern Oregon, have a beautiful weekend. Talk to you next time. Bye now.
Bye-bye.